Mun Summ Wong y Richard Hassell fundaron WOHA en 1994 con sede en Singapur, reconocidos internacionalmente por integrar principios ambientales y sociales en cada etapa del proceso de diseño. Han diseñado una gran variedad de proyectos innovadores que han sido construidos en varias ciudades y países. Sus proyectos más reconocidos han sido difundidos como puntos de referencia de diseño sustentable. WOHA ha ganado 6 categorías diferentes en el World Architecture Festival. Démosle la bienvenida a MEXTRÓPOLI 2017.
Hola. Hola, Mexico. This is Mun Summ and I'm Richard Hassell. And yeah, we're very happy to be in Mexico and to meet so many wonderful people and share some conversations about architecture. We recently published this book, Garden City, Megacity, which is a book with some thoughts about how we should be building in cities in the future. We've got some extracts from the book on the slides, but you're not meant to read the fine text. We're just using the extract as a way of showing you what's in the book, and we'll explain as we go through. So we've been really interested in the topic of the megacities around the world, and I think Mexico City is a megacity too. And that the kind of issues we're talking about are really issues of quantity. And a lot of what I think as architects that we're dealing with is always about quality, which is wonderful, but you know, there's a certain problem with rolling out even the same kind of quality projects that were done in the last century with the kind of scales of cities that we're talking about, for instance, 90 million or 55 million people. You simply can't keep expanding the city at the density of the last century. So we were interested in looking back at the solutions of the 20th century. Le Corbusier with the Ville Contemporaire and Ville Radieuse in the 1920s. And these were really ideal solutions to post-World War reconstruction in the 1950s. And these city plans were designed to solve the problems of the 20th century. For instance, rebuilding after the war, population, transport, and dealing with the automobile. And so they've become the default solution for new cities today. But we do feel like they're not necessarily solutions to the problems of the 21st century, which is about massive populations and about sustainability. So what we've seen as the Le Corbusier template has been rolled out across the developing world, they're at a scale that was not anticipated, and they're actually making cities which are quite ugly and unsustainable, and in many cases devoid of a public realm and devoid of community. So here you see Shanghai, where you can see 20th century urban fabric just rolled out across the surface of the planet as far as the eye can see. And it's not really a city about public space and parks, and it has an enormous ecological footprint outside the city for food, energy, and water. And so if you combine all the ecological footprints of the cities of the world, they now exceed the size of planet Earth. So we really urgently need to do something about shrinking our ecological footprints. We were always very interested in the garden city, and I think the garden city suburbs that developed in the 20th century or just before really afforded many people an amazing lifestyle. And although I think now it's a little unfashionable to like the suburbs, for many people it's a really beautiful way to live, surrounded by nature with space to play and have your own garden. But unfortunately, we can't roll out garden suburbs for 90 million people. It's just not possible. But we're wondering if some of these qualities can be created at much higher densities. So I think Many cities have a great lifestyle in the center of the city, but are surrounded by areas which are of much lower quality. And so we're wondering whether the kind of great environment that you get in, for instance, the nice areas of Mexico City, you know, if we can actually replicate them at 4 or 5 times the density. So a big question in our work is, does high density mean that we lose amenity, or can we create high density that's also very high amenity? So that's really the theme of our book, and it's about ways of achieving wonderful urban space at very high density. So we're looking for vibrant streets, for parks and nature that's wrapped through projects that are actually at very, very high densities. So in the book we have several strategies that we've been playing with. So one is macro architecture, micro urbanism. So rather than seeing urbanism as a kind of two-dimensional template for the city that is populated with buildings, to think, are there possibilities if you actually think about a spatial version of a city in order to achieve a mega city that has this sort of macro architectural quality. At the same time, very large buildings become like cities in themselves, and we need to apply principles of urbanism to the way that you negotiate your way through a very large structure. Another technique to deal with this very high density is layering, and we found this has been something very useful. So what we've seen is, as densities increase to very high levels, the pressure on the ground plane becomes immense, and at some point it's just too overwhelming, and there's certain things that you have at ground level, such as transport deliveries, waste management, electrical substations. At a certain point of density, the ground plane is completely given over to rather unappealing things, and the public space disappears. So we realized if we can replicate ground planes and identify separate areas for these activities, we can actually get a very vibrant ground plane city, as well as solving all the problems, logistical problems of the city. Planting cities, so another aspect that people usually talk about, a loss of density. When you have a high density, you lose green spaces in the city, or the green spaces become overcrowded. But actually, when you're building high-rise or high-density projects, you're actually just building space, and it's very much a choice of the participants or the stakeholders in the development as to what kind of space you're creating. And nothing says that we can't create green space at an even greater ratio than we would have in a project on the ground. We are operating in the tropics, and although Mexico's cities in the tropics and has a most fantastic climate, in many places we're working it's very, very hot and very, very humid, and so many types of projects have been converting to 100% air-conditioned projects that never open up to the outside. And a lot of this is because the kind of 20th century prototypes that we've been importing from New York or Chicago, where you get very deep floor plates, which simply don't work in the tropics unless you air condition them. But we've been looking at ways of making sure very large projects can still have access to natural light, natural ventilation, and in a way reconfiguring the prototypes or the typologies of these buildings so that we can get windows to every room. In our book, we also propose a way of evaluating and rating these kind of projects, because we realize when we talk to public officials or developers, they have their own metrics, which in many cases we think is antagonistic to the enjoyment of the end user or the citizen of the city. And so we've proposed a series of ratios. The green plot ratio, which measures how much garden compared to the site. Community plot ratio, which measures how much social space and community space there is in relation to the area of the site. A civic generosity index, so this measures if your building was a person, what kind of citizen would it be? Is it a generous person that participates in the civic life of the city, or is it a very selfish and taking kind of person that never gives. And so we think this one is really important because we've seen, especially neoliberal capitalism, that basically it's always a taking situation from the city and never a giving one. The ecosystem contribution index is something where we've seen as cities spread across the planet, we need to start thinking not just about human life in our cities, but also the ecosystem, the plants and animals that share our planet with us. And we realized once we started creating green space, we could make this perform at a much higher level, not just about decorative gardens, but about gardens that actually have a vibrant ecosystem within them. And the last one, self-sufficiency index, is a kind of absolute measure of the things that rating systems such as LEED or Green Star measure. And, but the self-sufficiency one measures it against the absolute goal of self-sufficiency in food, energy and water. And so while a project may score very highly in LEED, maybe it's a platinum rated building, you might find from a self-sufficiency point of view, it's only at a 5% or a 10% self-sufficiency. So it gives you an idea of how far we need to go and how we can't get complacent about the performance of our buildings.
Next, we will show 5 projects, 3 are completed ones that will demonstrate some of the strategies we have and also the ratings we have. We always start off with this page where we do identify the ratings and how we score them ourselves. And this one is a social housing project in Singapore, completed in 2007. It's for 960 homes of sort of a medium income housing. It's 47 stories tall with a plot ratio of something like 10 minus the car park areas.
So what the project does, although it's very large, it breaks down the volume of the building into 12 villages of 80 homes each, because we felt this was a very social size where you could get to know your neighbours. And each village shares one of these spaces that you see on the screen now. So there's a social space where people can get together, their kids can study or play, you can walk your dog, and it's only a few stories of stairs to walk down from your unit to this area.
So this are vertical hot stacks where we have actually effected cross ventilation through the apartments and hot air rises through this hot stack, making it possible for the apartments to be all naturally ventilated.
We've done some tests in these areas, and the arrangement actually creates an internal updraft of about 2 meters per second. On the top of a building is a public park, so the whole neighbourhood can come here and watch the sunset or go for a jog around the top of the building. And you can actually run for 400 metres around the top of the building.
And on top you can see is an area of PV panels. So as a diagram, you can see this is 3 clusters of villages, each made up of 10 to 11 stories. And on top of each one, there's always some public space that they would create to belong to this sky village. And with this arrangement, we can literally just extend the sky villages upwards into 12 sky villages in this case. But the fact is that we could actually go taller if the structure could permit. So we've chosen sort of 10 to 11 stories between each sky terrace level and dividing them into these 8 80 homes, is because within 10 to 11 stories is about 20 to 30 meters. It's still within visual recognition of someone standing at the topmost floor looking down to the terrace level and be able to recognize and maybe even shout across to call him, son, it's time to come home to eat, perhaps. On the ground level, we kept essentially a lot of big trees and kept it as a rail park for the residents. And creating also community living rooms that look up into these big gardens. And this is a typical unit plan where we have located the sky terraces. So from one end to the other end, you can actually cross between the sky villages and be able to walk 200 meters one end to the other. So this is one of the clusters where you look down from the walkways down to the cluster of this cluster to see the common communal living spaces and gardens and the multiple layers of the sky parks that are created. We went back to interview some of the owners.
No doubt
residents.
this residential complex is quite big scale. It's like concrete jungle. But yeah, at the same time, it is quite small scale in the sense that the units are actually housed within certain villages. They're actually connected by all these intermediate sky gardens. It makes us want to not just stay within our homes, okay, but really to spend some time outside to just interact and bond with one another.
I think with all this being presented together, it increases the chance for interaction and also engaging the neighbor and the people around you. That's something that's lacking around in many parts of Singapore where you're just purely living in an urban jungle.
The idea of this building is trying to make it like a kampong style where you really try to meet up each other. When you're getting quite late in the night, it's actually very quiet. And the wind is good.
So we can have our dinners while enjoying the view over there. That makes it a perfect place for us to communicate and then to socialize among other neighbors.
The second project is a mixed-use development of a hotel component and offices, also completed in the year 2007. What was the key element of this was that we've been pushing the boundaries of green replacement, and in this project we managed to push it to 2.5% of the site area. And there's an urban park in front of it, and we have created the same size of this urban park into landscape gardens and terraces in the building itself.
That's 250%, Mun Summ.
Yes, 250%. So instead of a basement car park, we chose to create a elevated car park, a multi-story car park, but use this as a structure, geological inspired structure to actually use it to support landscaping. And all the spaces you move through always tries to bring in the landscape into the interiors. So even the ballroom has got extensive views of landscape, and on the other side, the mirrors actually mirrors the landscape back into it. And on the 5th floor, the entire floor, almost the site area, is actually used for recreational purposes. And above, we have the guest rooms. And all the guest rooms are accessed through an open corridor that's naturally ventilated, and vertically it becomes a vertical park for the social housing at the back to look into. And all rooms have this view of the sky gardens and terraces. We realized that when you actually reach a replacement value of 200%, green replacement of 200%, it really has a huge impact on the city. So all these sky gardens have created a zero energy. We have PV panels to actually operate them, and that all the water that falls from the building is harvested and used for irrigation of the landscaping. And this is the vertical park, vertical landscape that we have created for the social housing at the back to look into.
Singapore City is actually 5 degrees warmer now than it was when it was first settled because of the loss of landscape. So if every building in Singapore had this kind of green cover, we think we could drop the temperature of Singapore back down at least 3 or 4 degrees. And that would make a huge difference to the energy bill that Singapore has for air conditioning all the buildings.
The third project was recently completed, is the WOHA Downtown Hotel. I think a point to note is the green replacement ratio. Here we have achieved 1,110%. We were not happy with 250%. We wanted to see how far we can push it. And in a vertical tower, we managed to actually achieve a super high percentage.
This, we think, is a really important figure because it means one new project can actually compensate for loss of greenery in another 10 projects. This project is 2/3 hotel and 1/3 serviced offices.
This drone was taken some 6 months to 8 months back. The landscaping is actually very thick now, and the facade just continues to get greener every day. And very common people ask us why we chose red. The answer is quite straightforward. And should the landscaping not grow well in certain patches, a little bit red will be revealed as if there are flowers in the landscape.
It's also a very auspicious color for Chinese, so the owner was quite happy with the bright red building.
Well, one of the reasons we wanted to test this vertical landscaping, integrated landscaping, was really when we did all these horizontal gardens in the project before, we realized that we could actually cater to the flying animals and insects, but we couldn't for the climbing creatures and the insects as well. So here we decided to actually have this vertical landscaping that squirrels could actually climb to all the sky terraces floors to actually make a home there.
The structure of the tower is in the 4 corners, and then the intermediate levels transfer back to these corners at every sky garden level. So here you can see various views of the tower. So basically the lifts come up in the four corners, and then we have L-shaped blocks that span between on two sides of the square.
So these sky terraces are used as the common amenities floors, and in this case, this is actually the reception lobby for the hotel. So the reception lobby of the hotel in an urban situation here is actually not air conditioned, it's actually naturally ventilated. So we have been trying in many ways to think of the program and finding areas that we actually don't need to air condition to reduce the load of air conditioning.
The framing of the city is quite interesting, though we found that even though the neighbors are very close, by having this device of the space and then the layering of the screen, it doesn't feel close to the neighbors at all. And this is the roof terrace, which has a restaurant and club space.
So this is a diagram to show the site area is just 100%, and through the horizontal sky terraces and gardens and the vertical cladding of greenery on it, we actually achieve 1,110%. And this is various stages of the landscaping growing through it. And this one shows you a little bit of a time lapse of the plants growing.
We have a total of 21 species of creepers, so we're letting them battle it out to see which ones like which position the best. And it will probably over time change every day as the different creepers grow and take over different areas.
So these are giant outdoor rooms in a tower block. And this building is rather unusual. You can actually stand in the middle of the building and be able to look at four different directions and be able to see right through to the views.
So those three projects we think are, in a way, can be seen as prototypes for buildings which you could create quite a different city from. And we've been very interested in what can we do with more than just a single building, but what we could do at an urban scale. So we actually did a competition in Singapore for a new town for 250,000 people. And in this project, we gave ourselves the goal of shrinking the footprint of the city to the size of the town. So we wanted to be self-sufficient in food, energy, and vegetables and water for the entire city. And what we realized was that if we're going to be really sensible in the way we use energy and its sustainability, we really need to make the most of our solar energy. And so that a city that's going to be self-sufficient needs to be designed from the point of view of using the sun to the best efficiency. So we have a rooftop canopy layer which has the solar cells on top. Beneath that we have an agricultural layer, so you can actually run a full farming operation on top of the building. Below that we then can have all the apartments and offices and various programmatic areas. And then at the ground level, we could also keep a full rainforest running through the city.
And the basement will be for the servicing and the infrastructure for the city.
So this is a typical top of the tower. So it's like a giant landscape of an agricultural area. We realized that the traditional bar graph skyline of the 20th century city is really bad for sustainability because each building shades another building. If you invest on solar panels, maybe your neighbour will shade you next year. And so we think actually master planning in an energy level and a food level is really critical to achieve a higher level of sustainability. And the ground plan we think can be something that's developed to be a really a vibrant area. And rather than thinking of the city as being really interesting, you know, from a distance with this skyline that goes up and down, we had the idea of the inverted skyline so that the city at pedestrian level has a wildly varying civic space from high to low spaces, and with a forest running through it to make the city really interesting at the human level rather than from the picture postcard level.
This last project isn't really a project, it's actually a research paper that we put in for the Vertical City Asia in Singapore in the year 2011. And that was to envision how you could actually create another population of 5.5 million people in Singapore using a much lesser area and to achieve a density of 100,000 people per square kilometer. This would be something like 4 times that of New York, but it would be no different from maybe the urban sprawl of the Mumbai slum areas.
So it's really a test to see how super high density could still, whether it could be bearable or not.
So we just used one of our buildings, a building that we have achieved in Bangkok, and used it as a city column, as a building to support buildings and infrastructure and community spaces. And we managed to actually, because we're in the tropics, daylight is so wonderful, this permeable electricity is almost possible if you could actually create enough porosity within it and allow all the users' functions to be naturally ventilated and naturally lit as well. So this city would occupy no more than 45 square kilometer on a series of islands on the southern part of Singapore. It would not have vehicles in it. It's all serviced with trains, and traveling between the city is really vertically and horizontally between the city conduits. Here you see the horizontal city conduits, and each stack of that separates the city conduits would be about 50 stories, and this entire structure is no taller than the tallest building on Earth at the moment, Burj Khalifa.
So despite it being 5 million people, no one would be more than 100 meters from a park. And here's a Mexican version.
And to end, we really did enjoy ourselves tremendously in Mexico, and one of the nicest things to take away was a good, quiet moment at Louis Barragan's house.
Thank you very much.